The most dangerous person in any courtroom is not the one who speaks the loudest, but the one who already knows the truth. The marble corridors of the federal courthouse echoed with measured footsteps as attorneys, deputies, reporters, and court employees prepared for another busy morning. Sunlight poured through towering glass windows, casting long golden reflections across the polished stone floor, while the American flag stood quietly beside the entrance to the largest courtroom in the building. Every face carried purpose. Every conversation seemed important. Yet among the crowd, one encounter was about to change far more than the outcome of a single hearing. Officer Ryan Walker walked confidently through the security checkpoint wearing a neatly pressed police uniform, with his badge shining beneath the courthouse lights. His reputation inside the department had always been built upon confidence. Many younger officers admired him because he rarely questioned himself, believing years of experience had taught him everything necessary about people. That confidence had slowly become something else. It convinced him that his badge represented more than responsibility. It represented protection. It represented influence. Most dangerously, it convinced him that first impressions were almost always correct. As Ryan entered the hallway leading toward courtroom 7, he noticed a black woman standing beside a wooden table covered with organized legal files. She wore a navy business suit, comfortable low-heeled shoes, and a simple silver watch. Her dark leather briefcase rested beside several neatly labeled folders while she calmly reviewed documents with complete focus. She greeted passing court staff with quiet professionalism, occasionally smiling as clerks wished her a good morning. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was seeking attention. She seemed entirely comfortable blending into the ordinary rhythm of the courthouse. Ryan barely slowed his pace. He glanced toward the table, immediately deciding she must be another administrative assistant preparing paperwork before the attorneys arrived. Without asking a single question, he allowed assumption to replace curiosity. As he passed, he made a dismissive remark about people who spent more time organizing files than understanding real police work. His voice was loud enough for nearby visitors to hear, causing several conversations to stop for a brief moment. A young law clerk looked down awkwardly. An elderly man waiting for another hearing shifted uncomfortably on the wooden bench. The woman slowly raised her eyes from the documents and met Ryan's gaze with remarkable calm. There was no anger in her expression, no embarrassment, no attempt to defend herself. She simply offered a polite smile before returning to the files in front of her. Ryan interpreted her silence as confirmation that his assumption had been correct. He continued walking toward the courtroom entrance, completely unaware that nearly every courthouse employee who had witnessed the exchange recognized the woman immediately. Some exchanged uncertain glances but chose to remain silent, knowing the official proceedings would soon reveal everything that needed to be revealed. The woman carefully straightened one final stack of evidence, closed her briefcase with deliberate precision, and thanked the court clerk for locating an additional document she needed. Her voice remained calm, warm, and respectful toward everyone around her. She believed professionalism should never depend upon the way another person behaved. Years of public service had taught her that patience often revealed character more clearly than confrontation ever could. As the courtroom doors opened, attorneys began entering one by one while deputies directed visitors toward the gallery. Ryan adjusted his uniform, convinced the hearing would be routine and certain his experience would carry him through another ordinary day. The woman quietly picked up her briefcase and walked toward counsel table without introducing herself or explaining her position. She had no interest in correcting assumptions before the appropriate moment arrived. Inside the courtroom, sunlight settled across the polished wood. The judge's bench stood ready beneath the national seal, and every chair slowly filled with people waiting for justice to begin. Ryan took his place with complete confidence, never imagining that within minutes he would discover the quiet black woman he had dismissed in the hallway was not an assistant at all, but the federal prosecutor assigned to question every decision he believed no one would ever challenge. Maya Richardson took her seat at the counsel table with the same quiet confidence she carried into every courtroom, carefully arranging her legal files in precise order before placing a yellow notepad beside them. She neither glanced toward Officer Ryan Walker nor reacted to the uncomfortable exchange that had taken place only minutes earlier in the hallway. Her attention remained fixed on the evidence, because she had learned long ago that preparation spoke louder than pride. The courthouse around her gradually settled into its familiar rhythm as attorneys whispered to clients. Court reporters adjusted their equipment, deputies greeted one another with professional courtesy, and members of the public quietly filled the gallery. To everyone who truly knew Maya, this calm focus was completely ordinary. She had built her career upon the belief that justice belonged to facts rather than personalities, and that every person entering a courtroom deserved the same fairness regardless of reputation, profession, or social standing. That belief had not appeared overnight. It had been shaped by decades of discipline, patience, and countless moments when she chose dignity instead of resentment. Maya had grown up in a modest neighborhood where education was treated as both an opportunity and a responsibility. Her mother spent more than 30 years teaching elementary school, reminding every student that respect was something given before it was earned. Her father worked as a librarian who believed every question deserved an honest answer and every visitor deserved a warm greeting. Around the family dinner table, conversations rarely focused on winning arguments. Instead, they centered on understanding people, accepting responsibility, and protecting the truth even when doing so required courage. Those values remained with Maya throughout college, law school, and every stage of her legal career. As a young attorney, she quickly became known for thorough preparation rather than dramatic courtroom performances. Senior prosecutors noticed that witnesses trusted her because she listened carefully before asking questions. Judges appreciated that she remained respectful even during difficult proceedings. Defense attorneys often admitted, sometimes privately, that Maya never relied on intimidation because she understood that confidence built upon evidence was stronger than confidence built upon volume. Over time, she earned the position of senior federal prosecutor, yet her daily routine changed very little. She still arrived early each morning, reviewed every page personally, greeted courthouse employees by name, and carried her own briefcase instead of expecting assistants to do simple tasks for her. She believed titles should increase responsibility rather than distance people from ordinary acts of professionalism. That philosophy explained why she had been standing alone in the hallway organizing documents before court convened. She never considered any task beneath her position because every detail contributed to serving justice honestly. Across the courtroom, Ryan Walker remained unaware of the history, sitting only a few yards away. He noticed Maya quietly reviewing her files, but still assumed she occupied a supporting role in the proceedings. His attention shifted toward conversations with fellow officers who had accompanied him to the hearing. They exchanged confident remarks about the case, speaking with the ease of people who believed the day would unfold exactly as expected. Ryan felt little concern. Years of positive evaluations and successful assignments had convinced him that his professional judgment would continue carrying him through difficult situations. He had never truly considered the possibility that confidence without humility could become its own blind spot. Meanwhile, Maya opened one final folder containing carefully organized exhibits and witness notes. She paused for a brief moment to reread the opening page, not because she doubted her preparation, but because she respected the importance of every proceeding. She understood that decisions made inside the courtroom could influence careers, families, and public trust. That awareness kept her grounded regardless of how many high-profile cases she handled. As the courtroom clock approached the scheduled hour, the clerk quietly announced that everyone should prepare to rise. Conversations faded into silence. The judge's entrance was only moments away, and with it would come the formal introduction that would quietly overturn every assumption Ryan had carried with him since he first stepped into the courthouse that morning. Officer Ryan Walker remained seated at the witness table, adjusting the sleeves of his neatly pressed uniform while quietly observing the courtroom around him. The confidence that had carried him through years of police work still rested comfortably on his shoulders. He believed he understood exactly how the morning would unfold because he had testified before. Judges asked questions. Attorneys challenged details. Officers answered with confidence, and eventually everyone returned to work. Experience had convinced Ryan that the courtroom was simply another place where his badge carried weight. Over the years, he had earned commendations, received positive evaluations, and developed a reputation as an officer who rarely hesitated during difficult situations. Younger officers often sought his advice, admiring the certainty with which he approached every assignment. Ryan appreciated that respect, but without realizing it, he slowly allowed confidence to become something more dangerous. He stopped questioning his own first impressions. Instead of viewing every person as an individual with a unique story, he began believing that years of experience gave him the ability to judge character almost instantly. That habit became so natural that he no longer recognized it as a weakness. Inside the police department, few people challenged him because his work record appeared solid and his supervisors trusted his dedication. Small assumptions gradually became permanent habits, and those habits quietly shaped the way he interacted with strangers long before conversations ever began. Ryan genuinely believed he treated people fairly, yet fairness built upon assumptions was never true fairness at all. It was confidence without reflection. Across the courtroom, Maya Richardson calmly organized the final pages of her case file while listening to the quiet conversations surrounding her. She noticed Ryan speaking comfortably with another officer, occasionally smiling as though the hearing presented little reason for concern. Maya felt no satisfaction watching his confidence. She understood that every person deserved the opportunity to learn rather than simply be judged by one moment. Throughout her career, she had encountered witnesses, attorneys, investigators, and public officials who underestimated others before learning the full truth. Some changed, others refused. She never tried to predict which outcome would occur because her responsibility was not to change personalities. Her responsibility was to present facts honestly and allow justice to follow its proper course. The courtroom itself reflected the seriousness of that responsibility. Rows of polished wooden benches filled steadily with members of the public waiting quietly for proceedings to begin. Court reporters completed final equipment checks while deputies greeted visitors with calm professionalism. Sunlight streamed through the tall courthouse windows, illuminating the carved wood beneath the national seal above the judge's bench. The atmosphere carried a quiet dignity that reminded everyone present the courtroom belonged not to personalities, but to the rule of law. Ryan glanced briefly toward Maya once more. Seeing her continue arranging documents reinforced his original assumption that she occupied a supporting role. He wondered privately why she appeared so calm when important attorneys had not yet entered the courtroom. He never considered that true confidence rarely required dramatic entrances or unnecessary attention. Meanwhile, several courthouse employees exchanged subtle glances as they watched the two individuals preparing for the same hearing. They knew exactly who Maya was because they had seen her conduct some of the courthouse's most respected federal cases with unwavering professionalism. None of them interrupted the silence. They understood that introductions inside a courtroom followed formal procedures, and within minutes, every misunderstanding would resolve itself naturally. The courtroom clock reached the scheduled hour. The clerk stood, announcing that everyone should rise for the arrival of the judge. Conversations disappeared instantly as every person stood with respectful attention. Ryan straightened his uniform and faced the bench with complete confidence, believing the morning remained entirely under his control. Maya quietly closed her legal folder, lifted her eyes toward the front of the courtroom, and took one steady breath. Neither expression revealed excitement or anxiety. She simply looked prepared. As the judge entered and everyone returned to their seats, the clerk began introducing the parties to the case, and Ryan prepared to hear a name that would quietly dismantle every assumption he had carried into the courthouse that morning. The courtroom settled into complete silence as the clerk began reading the official appearances for the record. Ryan Walker listened with only partial attention, expecting to hear the names of attorneys he had never met before. He folded his hands confidently on the witness table, believing the morning remained predictable despite the formal atmosphere surrounding him. The judge acknowledged the presence of defense counsel before turning toward the opposite side of the courtroom. Then the clerk spoke clearly, appearing on behalf of the United States, Senior Federal Prosecutor Maya Richardson. Ryan instinctively looked toward the counsel table, expecting another attorney to stand. Instead, the black woman he had dismissed in the courthouse hallway calmly rose to her feet, buttoned her navy suit jacket, and introduced herself with quiet confidence. Every movement reflected preparation rather than performance. She thanked the court respectfully, confirmed her appearance for the record, and returned a polite nod to the judge. The courtroom remained perfectly still, yet Ryan felt as though the floor beneath him had shifted. The realization reached him slowly but completely. The woman he had assumed was organizing paperwork for someone else had been the lead federal prosecutor from the moment she entered the building. Several courthouse employees lowered their eyes, remembering the remark Ryan had made earlier that morning. None of them appeared surprised by Maya's role because they had worked beside her for years. What surprised them was how calmly she had accepted the disrespect without revealing her position. Ryan felt heat rise across his face as he replayed every word he had spoken in the hallway. For the first time in many years, he understood how quickly confidence could become embarrassment when it rested upon assumptions instead of facts. Maya, however, showed no interest in revisiting the earlier encounter. She opened her case file, organized several exhibits, and addressed the judge with the same respectful tone she had used since arriving at the courthouse. She outlined the purpose of the hearing with careful precision, explaining the legal issues involved without exaggeration or personal criticism. Every sentence focused on evidence, procedure, and accountability rather than emotion. Her professionalism gradually redirected the courtroom's attention away from personalities and back toward the responsibility of discovering the truth. Ryan watched quietly, noticing details he had ignored before. He realized she never raised her voice to command respect. She never attempted to impress anyone with complicated language. Her confidence came entirely from preparation and integrity. The judge listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that Maya answered directly and thoughtfully. Members of the gallery followed every exchange with growing interest, recognizing the calm authority she carried without ever needing to announce it. Ryan's defense attorney leaned toward him briefly, whispering practical advice about remaining focused on the questions that would soon follow. Ryan nodded, but his thoughts remained fixed on the lesson unfolding before him. He understood that nothing Maya said inside the courtroom could embarrass him as much as his own behavior had already done. The hearing had barely begun, yet the greatest revelation was not about legal arguments. It was about character. Maya had entered the courthouse prepared to fulfill her duty regardless of how another person treated her. Ryan had entered believing his badge protected him from uncomfortable self-reflection. Now those beliefs stood side by side beneath the quiet dignity of the courtroom, where titles mattered less than truth and respect could never be earned by authority alone. As the judge invited the government to begin presenting its case, Maya stepped forward with composed determination, carrying only her legal folder and the confidence that comes from careful preparation. While Ryan finally understood that the most powerful person in the room had never needed to prove who she was because her actions had already done it for her. The judge gave a slight nod, and Maya Richardson stepped to the lectern carrying only a neatly organized folder and a legal pad filled with handwritten notes. She paused briefly before speaking, allowing the quiet dignity of the courtroom to settle naturally over everyone present. Her voice remained calm, steady, and respectful as she thanked the court before outlining the purpose of the hearing. She never looked toward Ryan Walker with resentment. Instead, she addressed the facts with remarkable discipline, reminding everyone present that the courtroom existed to examine evidence rather than personalities. Ryan listened carefully from the witness stand, still trying to process the realization that the woman he had dismissed only an hour earlier now directed every question that would shape the day's proceedings. His confidence had not disappeared entirely, but it no longer felt unshakable. For the first time in many years, he questioned whether certainty built upon assumptions had quietly led him into mistakes he had never recognized. Maya presented the timeline of the investigation one document at a time, carefully guiding the court through official reports, body camera records, written statements, departmental policies, and verified communication logs. Every exhibit appeared exactly where she said it would. Every date matched. Every reference connected logically to the next. The courtroom followed her presentation with complete attention because nothing felt exaggerated or theatrical. Her professionalism created its own quiet authority. The judge occasionally reviewed the exhibits before nodding for the proceedings to continue, while the court reporter documented every exchange with precise concentration. Ryan's attorney objected respectfully to one procedural detail, and Maya responded without raising her voice or displaying frustration. She cited the relevant federal rule, explained its application with clarity, and waited patiently while the judge reviewed the argument. Moments later, the objection was respectfully overruled, allowing the presentation to continue. Ryan noticed something unexpected. Maya never treated disagreement as a personal attack. She simply focused on the law, the evidence, and the responsibility both sides carried toward the truth. That realization unsettled him more deeply than any difficult question could have. As additional exhibits appeared on the courtroom screens, the hearing slowly revealed inconsistencies between Ryan's earlier written statements and objective records collected during the investigation. None of the differences alone seemed dramatic, yet together they painted a picture of decisions made too quickly and conclusions reached before every fact had been considered. Maya never accused Ryan of intentional wrongdoing. Instead, she repeatedly asked whether certain assumptions had influenced his judgment before all available information had been verified. Each question sounded measured rather than confrontational. Ryan answered honestly, but with every response he became increasingly aware that the issue extended beyond paperwork. It reached into the habits that had shaped his professional instincts over many years. Members of the public gallery exchanged thoughtful glances, while several younger officers quietly watched from the back of the courtroom. They expected an aggressive confrontation. Instead, they witnessed something far more powerful. They watched one person demonstrate that respect and accountability could exist together. Maya never attempted to embarrass Ryan. She allowed the evidence to speak with its own quiet strength, trusting that truth required neither anger nor humiliation to become visible. The judge leaned forward slightly as another document was entered into the record, studying the sequence of events with careful attention before asking several clarifying questions. Maya answered each one directly, referring only to verified facts already introduced before the court. Ryan responded when invited, recognizing that every answer carried weight because honesty now mattered more than protecting pride. The atmosphere inside the courtroom grew heavier with reflection rather than hostility. Ryan realized that the greatest challenge before him was no longer defending his previous decisions. It was deciding whether he possessed the humility to learn from them. Across the room, Maya closed one folder and opened another with the same composed expression she had carried throughout the morning. She neither celebrated favorable moments nor reacted to difficult ones. Her purpose remained unchanged from the instant she entered the courthouse. She had come to protect the integrity of the legal process, believing that justice achieved through fairness strengthened everyone, including those required to confront uncomfortable truths. As the hearing moved toward its most important testimony, the silence inside the courtroom seemed deeper than before, not because anyone feared what would happen next, but because every person present understood they were witnessing something far greater than a legal dispute. They were watching character, responsibility, and truth quietly reshape the meaning of authority itself. The judge announced a brief recess before the afternoon session, and the courtroom slowly emptied into the quiet marble hallways of the federal courthouse. Conversations remained soft, almost respectful, as attorneys gathered their files and court staff organized exhibits for the next stage of the hearing. Maya Richardson remained seated for a moment after everyone else began to leave. She carefully closed the final folder she had referenced during the morning session, aligned every document with practiced precision, and rested both hands gently upon the polished wooden table. The silence surrounding her felt familiar rather than uncomfortable. It reminded her that the most important decisions in life were rarely made during moments of noise. They were made during moments when no one else was speaking. Sunlight drifted through the tall courtroom windows, stretching long bands of warm light across the hardwood floor until they reached the counsel table, where Maya quietly gathered her notes. Dust floated gently through the afternoon light, moving almost invisibly through the still air, while the American flag stood motionless beside the judge's bench. The courthouse no longer felt like a place of conflict. It felt like a place where patience allowed truth to arrive at its own pace. Maya picked up her leather briefcase and stepped into a small conference room reserved for government counsel. She placed the briefcase on the table before walking toward the window overlooking the city. Cars moved steadily through the streets below. People crossed sidewalks carrying coffee cups and briefcases, and life continued outside without any awareness of the quiet lessons unfolding inside the courthouse walls. She rested one hand lightly against the window frame, and allowed herself a single slow breath. Her thoughts traveled back many years to evenings spent at the family dinner table, where her parents never measured success by titles or victories. Her father often smiled before saying, "The truth does not need your anger. It only needs your courage." Her mother would gently add, "Respect people before they give you a reason to respect them. If you wait for proof, you have already judged them." Those words had remained with Maya through every stage of her career. They guided her through difficult cases, public criticism, long nights of preparation, and moments when emotions threatened to overpower judgment. She understood that justice achieved through humiliation was never complete justice. The law existed to protect fairness, not pride. Across the hallway, Ryan Walker sat alone on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, while several other officers quietly spoke with one another farther down the corridor. For the first time in years, Ryan ignored the conversations around him. Instead, he replayed the morning repeatedly in his mind. He remembered the casual confidence with which he had dismissed Maya before learning who she truly was. He remembered the calm expression she maintained instead of responding with anger. Most of all, he remembered that throughout the hearing she had never attempted to embarrass him personally, even though she easily could have. That realization settled heavily upon him. He began wondering how many other people he had unknowingly judged before learning anything meaningful about them. The question stayed with him because no report, policy, or courtroom procedure could answer it. Only honest reflection could. The courthouse hallway remained unusually peaceful. Court employees passed quietly, exchanging polite greetings while preparing for the afternoon calendar. Somewhere in the distance, the gentle sound of a clock marked another passing minute. The building itself seemed to encourage patience. No one hurried. No one raised a voice. The pause between sessions became more than a break in legal proceedings. It became a quiet space where perspective could begin replacing assumption. Maya looked once more through the courthouse window before returning to the conference table. She opened her notebook and reviewed only a few final points, not because she doubted her preparation, but because she respected the responsibility waiting beyond the courtroom doors. Ryan slowly stood from the wooden bench at nearly the same moment, straightened his uniform, and walked back toward the courtroom with noticeably slower steps than before. Neither of them spoke. Neither needed to. The afternoon light followed both of them through separate hallways toward the same destination, carrying with it the quiet certainty that truth had already begun changing more than the outcome of a single hearing. It had begun changing two lives in very different ways. The afternoon session resumed beneath the quiet dignity of the federal courtroom, and every person returned to the same seat with a deeper awareness that the hearing had become about far more than legal procedure. The judge welcomed everyone back before, inviting Maya Richardson to continue presenting the government's case. She stood once again with composed confidence, carrying only a slim folder containing the final sequence of verified exhibits. Her movements remained calm, her voice measured, and her attention fixed entirely upon the responsibility before the court. She thanked the judge before displaying a carefully organized timeline that connected every official report, recorded communication, written statement, and departmental policy already entered into evidence. Rather than speaking dramatically, she simply guided the court through the facts one careful step at a time. Each document reinforced the previous one. Each verified record supported the next. Nothing relied upon speculation. Nothing depended upon emotion. The evidence quietly formed a complete picture that no longer required explanation beyond the truth itself. Ryan Walker listened with complete attention, noticing details he had overlooked during earlier stages of the investigation. As each exhibit appeared on the courtroom display, he realized that several decisions he once believed reflected experience had actually been influenced by assumptions he never questioned. Maya never suggested that he lacked dedication to public service. Instead, she asked whether professional responsibility required officers to examine their own assumptions with the same discipline they used when examining evidence. The question echoed through the courtroom with surprising weight because it invited reflection rather than accusation. Ryan answered honestly that every officer carried that responsibility. As the words left his mouth, he understood they applied to him as much as anyone else. Maya thanked him respectfully before introducing the final exhibit, a collection of departmental training standards emphasizing impartial judgment, equal treatment, and public trust. She reminded the court that every badge represented an oath rather than personal authority, and that the strength of law enforcement depended upon public confidence earned through fairness. Her statement contained neither criticism nor triumph. It reflected the principles every officer had pledged to uphold from the beginning of their careers. The judge reviewed the exhibit carefully before looking toward Ryan with a thoughtful expression. After several moments, the judge asked a simple question. Looking back upon the events discussed throughout the hearing, would he handle the initial interaction differently today? The courtroom became completely silent. Reporters lowered their pens. Visitors stopped moving. Even the quiet sounds of keyboards and papers turning seemed to disappear. Ryan took a slow breath before answering. He admitted that he would. He acknowledged that he had allowed first impressions to influence his judgment before learning who Maya Richardson was as both a professional and a person. More importantly, he admitted that respect should never depend upon discovering someone's title or position. Those words were not offered as strategy. They reflected genuine understanding born through uncomfortable honesty. Maya remained composed as she listened. She neither smiled in victory nor displayed satisfaction. Instead, she thanked Ryan for answering sincerely and returned to her table without adding another unnecessary remark. The courtroom sensed something had changed. The most important moment of the hearing had not been created by a dramatic argument or an unexpected revelation. It had emerged from one person choosing truth over pride. The judge offered several observations before concluding that the evidence demonstrated the importance of accountability, impartiality, and continuous professional reflection within public service. The hearing would proceed through its remaining legal requirements according to established procedure, yet the central lesson had already become unmistakably clear. Authority carried its greatest value only when joined with humility. As the judge called for the next procedural step, warm afternoon sunlight reached farther across the courtroom floor than it had earlier that day, surrounding both counsel tables with the same gentle light. No one stood higher than anyone else beneath it. Maya quietly organized her files with the same careful precision she had shown since morning, while Ryan lowered his eyes for a brief moment before sitting a little straighter, carrying himself not with the certainty that had first brought him into the courthouse, but with the quieter confidence that begins when a person finally recognizes the difference between holding authority and deserving respect. When the judge formally concluded the hearing for the day, no one rushed toward the exit. The quiet dignity that had filled the courtroom from the beginning remained suspended in the afternoon light as attorneys gathered their files. Deputies thanked the court staff, and visitors slowly stood from the gallery. Maya Richardson carefully placed each document back into her leather briefcase exactly as she had organized them that morning. Her expression remained calm, unchanged by the outcome of the proceedings. She had never entered the courtroom hoping to defeat another person. She had entered hoping that the truth would be given the respect it deserved. That purpose had guided every decision she made throughout her career, and it continued guiding her now. Ryan Walker remained seated for several moments after everyone around him had begun leaving. He watched Maya, quietly thanking the courtroom clerk, shaking hands with another attorney, and offering a polite smile to the court reporter before preparing to leave. There was no celebration in her manner. There was no trace of satisfaction at seeing another person forced to confront difficult truths. The humility she displayed after the hearing matched the humility she had shown before it began. Ryan realized that was precisely what made her leadership so powerful. It was never dependent upon winning attention. It was rooted in character. After several deep breaths, Ryan stood, straightened his uniform, and walked toward the hallway outside the courtroom. He hesitated for only a moment before noticing Maya standing beside one of the courthouse windows waiting for the elevator. Warm afternoon sunlight reflected softly across the marble floor, creating a peaceful stillness that contrasted sharply with the assumptions he had carried into the building only hours earlier. Ryan approached slowly, stopping several feet away so that she would never feel cornered or pressured. Maya turned toward him with the same composed expression she had shown throughout the day. She waited patiently without speaking first. Ryan lowered his eyes briefly before meeting her gaze again. His voice sounded quieter than it had that morning. He admitted that he had judged her before learning anything about her, that he had allowed appearance to replace respect, and that his words in the hallway reflected habits he now understood needed to change. He did not attempt to justify his behavior. He did not blame stress, experience, or misunderstanding. He accepted responsibility completely, recognizing that accountability meant very little unless it began with honesty. Maya listened without interruption. When Ryan finished speaking, several moments of comfortable silence followed. She understood that genuine apologies often required courage because they demanded humility instead of excuses. Finally, she thanked him for speaking sincerely. She explained that everyone possessed the ability to grow, but only those willing to examine themselves honestly ever truly changed. She reminded him that respect should never become a reward given after discovering someone's profession, education, or authority. Real respect began long before names, titles, or accomplishments entered the conversation. Every person deserved that dignity from the very first moment. Ryan nodded slowly, allowing each word to settle deeply within him. He understood that Maya had offered him something more valuable than forgiveness alone. She had offered him an opportunity to become a better officer and a better human being. The courthouse elevator arrived with a quiet chime. Before stepping inside, Maya extended her hand. Ryan accepted it respectfully. The handshake lasted only a moment, yet it carried more meaning than any speech could have delivered. It marked the end of pride and the beginning of understanding. As the elevator doors closed, Ryan remained standing in the hallway, watching his own reflection appear faintly within the polished marble walls. For the first time in many years, he did not think about protecting his reputation. He thought about earning trust through the choices he would make from that day forward. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the broad stone steps where citizens from every background entered seeking fairness under the law. Ryan slowly walked through those doors with a different understanding of the badge resting upon his uniform. It no longer represented personal importance. It represented responsibility, humility, and the obligation to treat every individual with equal respect before knowing anything about who they were. Several months passed, and the federal courthouse continued its daily rhythm of footsteps, conversations, and quiet moments where important decisions were made. The building itself looked unchanged, with the same marble floors, tall windows, and carefully maintained halls where people arrived each morning searching for fairness and understanding. Yet for Maya Richardson and Ryan Walker, something fundamental had changed. The hearing that once brought them together as strangers had become a lasting reminder that true transformation rarely happens through a single conversation. It happens through the choices people make afterward. Maya continued her work as she always had. She arrived early, reviewed every document carefully, and treated every person who entered her office with the same patience and respect she believed everyone deserved. Her position never changed the way she interacted with people. Whether speaking with a senior official, a nervous witness, or someone visiting the courthouse for the first time, Maya approached each conversation with the same steady compassion. She understood that leadership was not measured by how many people recognized her title. It was measured by how many people felt respected because of her actions. Ryan carried the memory of that courtroom day differently. He did not talk about it often, and he never used it as a story to gain sympathy. Instead, he allowed the experience to quietly influence the way he approached his work. He began listening more carefully before forming conclusions. He became more aware of the assumptions people carried into everyday interactions. Most importantly, he learned that professional experience was valuable only when combined with the willingness to continue learning. One morning at the police department, a younger officer approached Ryan with a question about handling a difficult conversation with a member of the public. In the past, Ryan might have responded with a quick instruction based only on procedure. Instead, he asked the officer what the person might be experiencing, what concerns they might have, and whether there was a way to begin the conversation with understanding before authority. The younger officer noticed the difference immediately. Ryan was still confident, still knowledgeable, and still committed to his responsibilities. But the confidence no longer came from believing he could never be wrong. It came from knowing that growth required honesty. Across the city, Maya continued representing the principles she had carried throughout her career. She never knew exactly how many people were influenced by her example, and she never tried to count. She believed positive change often happened quietly, through moments that seemed ordinary but carried deeper meaning. A respectful conversation, a patient explanation, a decision to listen instead of assume. Those small choices shaped communities more than any public statement ever could. One evening, months after the hearing, Maya walked down the courthouse steps after finishing another long day. The sun was beginning to disappear behind the city buildings, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and gold. She paused for a moment, looking across the street as people continued moving through their evening routines. Families walked together. Workers headed home. Visitors entered the courthouse carrying their own hopes, questions, and challenges. The world continued moving forward, one person and one decision at a time. Inside the police department, Ryan placed his uniform jacket over the back of his chair before leaving for the evening. He looked at the badge attached to it, but he no longer saw it as a symbol of personal authority. He saw it as a reminder of responsibility. A reminder that every interaction created an opportunity either to build trust or to weaken it. The next morning, both Maya and Ryan would return to their responsibilities, continuing separate paths shaped by the same lesson. A person's value was never determined by appearance, position, or assumptions made before a conversation began. It was revealed through integrity, compassion, and the courage to change. As the courthouse lights slowly turned on against the evening sky, the quiet halls carried the same message they had carried for generations. Justice was not only found in decisions written on paper. It was found in the moments when people chose fairness over judgment, understanding over assumption, and humanity over pride.